It's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Tonight, how advancements in reproductive technology are opening doors to single motherhood. Then, after 3 days of deadly tornadoes, a storm threat from Texas to D.C., and how a mother turned her child's Down syndrome into a movement for change on the CBS Evening.
Stormy Daniels' testimony in Donald Trump's criminal trial is over.
They go into Rafah. I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah.
We don't need Joe Biden being a mouthpiece for Hamas. We certainly don't need it in our White House.
Israel is a vital ally of the United States of America, and that means that often you have disagreements with your allies.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Tough questions, bombshell testimony, and a motion denied. A judge refusing to amend the gag order against former President Trump in his New York criminal trial. This comes after Stormy Daniels finished her testimony on the witness stand after a second day. The adult film star has detailed an alleged Lake Tahoe encounter with former President Trump while Trump continued to rail against court proceedings.
This is purely and simply election interference. There is no case.
Jerika Duncan joins us now from outside the courthouse. Jerika, good to see you. I know you've been there all day reporting. So we have lawyers for former President Trump bringing several issues before the judge at the end of the day. What can you tell us?
So the first issue we should talk about is the gag order. Trump's defense team wanted to modify that, but the judge said no. He actually said that it is my concern that other witnesses will see your client, referring to Trump, doing whatever he intends to do, saying Juan Merchan. He said, I just can't take your word for it, that it will be a response, not an attack. This is essentially Trump saying he wants the freedom, the right to respond to some of the things that Stormy Daniels said when she testified, but the judge mentioning right there that he does not trust that it'll just simply be a response and not an attack. So did not win on that argument. And then you had the issue of whether or not Karen McDougal would be testifying. The prosecutors acknowledged that they do not plan on calling her to the stand. This is significant because she's the woman who said that she had a nearly year-long affair with Donald Trump. And then you have the issue of the mistrial. That is something that the defense has argued from the very beginning, but now saying that they believe that this trial should end, and it should end in a mistrial because of some of the prejudicial things that have come up in reference to Stormy Daniels' testimony on Tuesday, really going beyond the scope of what they expected to hear from her regarding what she says happened back in 2006.
And Jerika, speaking of that testimony from Stormy Daniels, that wrapped up today. Today's cross-examination was pretty combative at times. What did she have to say?
You know, in the very beginning, it was clear that the defense wanted to paint Stormy Daniels as someone that was out for money. And she said early on that I wanted to tell the truth. And as far as getting money, that was part of the deal. When pressed about Daniels' desire to make money from her story, the defense attorney said, but you wanted to make more money. And she said, no. That's why I did 60 Minutes for free. But then the defense went on to talk about all of the opportunities that came after that interview. A book deal worth nearly $1 million, a reality show, merchandise that was being sold, a documentary that recently came out, essentially saying that for the last, almost 18 years, that Stormy Daniels, according to the defense, has used this story to make money. Another thing I thought that was interesting, Caitlin, is when Daniels acknowledged that she has written, acted in, and directed over 150 adult films, the defense stated, well, Daniels had a lot of experience making up stories involving sex. Daniels replied, no. Sex is real, and went on to say, if that story was untrue, talking about the story that she's told, I would have written it to be a lot better. At which point I was in the overflow room. A lot of people had reactions to that comment. And that was something we saw throughout, where she would kind of fight back when the defense would try to paint her as someone that was getting all of this money. She talked about, well, wait a minute, I had to pay my attorneys. You know, I don't make all of the money when I'm signing these deals. She talked about the judgment that she lost and still owing money. And at one point even said that she's lost more essentially than she's gained by coming out and publicly saying that she had sex with the former president back in 2006.
There's so many details here, Jerika, and it's important to note that we don't have cameras in the courtroom, so we are grateful for your reporting and telling us what happened there. We also wrapped up the day with Trump's former assistant. What did we hear from her, and why is she testifying?
Yeah, so this is Madeleine Westerhout, and she was a young person excited about working in the Oval Office. She was an executive assistant to Donald Trump and was able to sort of connect the dots when you think about what Michael Cohen has said regarding a meeting in the Oval Office back in 2017. Through emails and testimony, she was able to confirm that she remembers setting up a meeting around February of 2017 with Michael Cohen and the president. This will be crucial because Michael Cohen has said before that that is when they decided to figure out how he was going to get paid that $130,000 that he paid Stormy Daniels for the hush money. What was interesting, though, too, in terms of just painting a little bit of color, since you don't have cameras in the courtroom, is all day, you know, the president, former president, seemed to be frustrated, upset. At times he was closing his eyes. But when Madeleine Westerhout was testifying about how much she enjoyed working for the then president, how much she respected him, she got choked up, and you saw him sort of look at her and smile, almost doting on the fact that this was someone that was speaking up for him, and even said in court she didn't think that he was treated fairly, and talked about it in a book that she wrote regarding her experience as an executive assistant to the president at that time.
Wow, fascinating color from the courtroom. Jerika Duncan, thank you so much for bringing it for us. And there is a new development in this case. The defense's motion for a mistrial has been denied. A rift between the White House and Benjamin Netanyahu's government is growing tonight. President Biden says the U.S. won't supply weapons for Israel to attack Rafah. The U.S. has already paused a shipment of roughly 3,500 bombs to Israel over concerns that they would be used in Gaza's most densely populated city. Our Ed O'Keefe joins us now from the White House with more. Ed, good to see you. So it appears that this divide between the White House and the Israeli government is growing. Let's take a listen to what the president had to say about this last night.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem.
All right, so Ed, we heard from the president there, but what's been the response from the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and from lawmakers on Capitol Hill?
Well, Republicans are seeking more answers from the White House and claiming that this has potentially detrimental effects to Israel's ability to carry out its ongoing military operations against Hamas. The White House has been quick to point out one shipment of several hundred, if not a few thousand plus pound bombs has been held up, and that's it. And that the president has pledged to continue providing what Israel needs for those military operations against Hamas, but has made clear he doesn't want these specific heavy bombs to be used in any kind of operation in Rafah specifically. So now he's essentially being much more specific about the use of these 2,500-pound bombs you see there, but otherwise more broadly says, look, we're going to, of course, continue to defend Israel or help Israel defend itself. What this has also exposed, though, Caitlin, is some real political divide within an already perilous coalition that Benjamin Netanyahu oversees. Two of his more hardline conservative members of his cabinet had some pretty explosive things to say about the president's decision, while others, including Benny Gantz, who's one of the more centrist members of that war cabinet, put out a statement later disavowing him and the government generally from the comments of those two other senior right-wing cabinet officials and made clear, look, the U.S. stood by Israel's side during its darkest hour, and the verbal attacks aimed at the U.S. made by some ministers are both irresponsible and distasteful and serve internal political considerations. He added later, I believe that the weapons shipments to Israel will continue, which is exactly what the White House said today. They will. But in this specific case, with those kinds of weapons, the president is expressing concern about them possibly being used in a forthcoming military operation should Israel decide to conduct one.
Yeah, of course, a lot of tricky politics here for both leaders, it seems. I do want to switch gears a little bit, Ed, and talk about kind of a politically adjacent story to the White House, because you have White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. His wife, Maggie Goodlander, has jumped into the New Hampshire House race. She's running for Congress. But I'm curious what you're hearing about that campaign, how it relates to Sullivan's possible role, given that he is in such a high-profile position at the White House.
Sure. Maggie Goodlander, a military veteran, someone who was an aide to Senators Joe Lieberman and John McCain back in the day, served in the Biden Justice Department and White House roles, has left those positions to go home to her native New Hampshire to run in the 2nd Congressional District. It's having itself a crowded primary as the sitting Congresswoman Annie Kuster is getting ready to retire. She announced her campaign today, and so we put it to the White House. Does this affect Jake Sullivan, her husband's role here at all? And the White House, on his behalf, made clear that this is his wife's campaign. He supports it, but she's going to run it. He's checked with the White House ethics lawyers, sees no need to change the scope of his job, but will adhere to the Hatch Act, which, of course, is that federal law that bars government officials from participating in partisan activities. In other words, he'll do it on his free time when he's not worrying about the fate of the world. It means it's going to be a busy schedule for him in the next few months, certainly. It was long expected that Sullivan's wife would go home to run for this position because she had resigned her White House job earlier this year, late last year, when Kuster announced that she was retiring. And it's also been known that both of them aspire to broader political office. And so here we go, and we'll see whether she is able to eke it out in this primary and possibly become a member of Congress next year.
Yeah, I can't imagine that Jake Sullivan has much free time to offer, but we shall see. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much. And a federal appeals court has rejected a bid by Hunter Biden to dismiss his federal gun charges. The 3-judge panel's ruling lets a trial against the president's son move forward, but it leaves open the possibility for another appeal if he's convicted. Hunter Biden faces 3 felony counts stemming from his purchase of a gun in 2018 while he was using drugs. And Stormy Daniels' testimony comes to an end in former President Trump's criminal trial. A look at what she had to say on the stand and how it's impacting the case. You're streaming America Decides.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
It's just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Today marked the 14th day of Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial in New York. The judge overseeing the case denied Trump's attorney's motion for a mistrial, as well as their request to modify his gag order. Here to take a closer look at the trial, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree and our own Bob Costa. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. 2 weeks, Bob, I know it's probably been a lot longer for you covering this. Tom, I want to start with you because we had the final day of Stormy Daniels' testimony, and there have been a lot of attacks from Trump's lawyers about her credibility. What do you make of her as a witness in this case?
I thought she was much better today than she was on Tuesday. I think that she grew and came into herself on the stand. On Tuesday, I felt that she was nervous, she was halting. I thought she contradicted herself at places. I felt that today she was much more poised. I think she frankly had something for both sides. I think on the prosecutor's side, I think she did a very good job holding her ground. The Trump defense team was pushing hard, trying to expose inconsistencies, biases, things like that. She came back, clever rejoinder. She spoke more slowly today than she did on Tuesday. So overall, I think it was a more effective presentation. I thought the defense got the better of Tuesday. I thought the prosecutors got the better of today.
And Bob, you've been covering this. What has Trump's reaction been to her testimony? I mean, just watching how he's been taking this trial in.
Well, at one moment, the judge, Juan Merchan, said Trump better stop cursing because it was audible that he was cursing inside the courtroom, as Stormy Daniels and others have testified. He's clearly frustrated talking to his allies, his legal team. He's simmering with anger about how this trial is unfolding, but he's mostly contained with the gag order when he's at the courthouse itself.
Yeah, I mean, to that notion, though, Bob, we've been talking about, you know, the courtroom and the campaign. He's still able to go out there and make public statements, essentially, all week.
He's making statements, but the statements he's trying to make inside the Republican Party are he wants to hold fundraisers, he wants to have rallies. This is a burden for him politically. They don't see it as a burden on his political standing. Yes, it could affect him with some voters. There's no guarantee that people aren't paying attention. At the same time, Trump's character has been baked into the political conversation in this country for a long time. So even my Democratic sources don't believe this trial or a conviction will change the trajectory of this campaign. But they do know, regardless of whether he's convicted or not, it sucks up his time. And that's a real political cost.
And Tom, let's talk about the trajectory of this case, because the Trump legal team wants to push for a mistrial. They haven't been successful yet. But what do you make of their argument? And is there an opportunity for them to be granted a mistrial at some point?
I think the likelihood of them getting a mistrial is close to zero. I don't fault the defense lawyers for doing it. I mean, that's what defense lawyers do. And frankly, as a legal matter, they have to make those motions to preserve it for appeal. So in that sense, they're doing their job. Is it a realistic likelihood they're going to get a mistrial? No. I think the big question for the defense lawyers is when the ball goes to the other court and it's time for them to present their case, what they're going to do. Are they going to call former President Trump to testify? My best guess is no. And frankly, if I were his defense lawyer and he wanted to testify, I would tackle him before he got to the witness stand, because I think he'd be a dreadful witness for them. But they are going to have to decide strategically what they are going to do when the spotlight shifts to them. And it's their chance to tell the jury what actually happened.
And in addition to this case, we got news this week that the judge in the classified documents case is postponing that case pretty much indefinitely. I want to talk about kind of the fundamentals of that and then the politics also. So, Tom, I guess I'll start with you. What do you make of that?
Well, It should not be a surprise to anyone. This is a judge who was clearly not going to be fast-tracking this case. She is a judge who likes to hear argument on motions. There are some judges who decide on the papers, meaning they read the briefs and they decide in their own chambers. There are other judges, like Judge Cannon, who enjoy having all the lawyers come in and have a big hearing. And that's great, but it does string things out. So the fact that she has now scheduled a whole sequence of motions, she's taken the trial date off the calendar entirely. From my perspective, I think the odds right now that there was a trial in that case before the election, I would say somewhere between 0 and 0.
Yeah, so that's what's interesting, Bob, too, because it could be a situation where this hush money case is the only case that Trump sees, essentially, before the election.
It's possible. It's going to be intriguing to watch as a reporter, as an American, what the Justice Department decides to do, what Judge Tanya Chutkan on the federal level in D.C. decides to do on January 6th. We're all waiting for the Supreme Court to weigh in on presidential immunity.
Right.
If they decide to kick down the question to lower courts, it's going to be hard for the Justice Department to move forward on some of these cases, though it's not impossible. But there's a real decision to be made. If Judge Chutkan decides to move ahead and have a trial, maybe August, September, October, November of an election year, what does that mean for the country, for the case itself? It's a charged moment legally and politically, but that doesn't mean it still won't go forward. But what happened in the last few days, it could lower the chances of federal trials going ahead.
Yeah, Tom, to Bob's point, how much would that kind of the politics of the moment and the calendar factor into decisions here? I mean, we've seen some decisions made at the 11th hour.
You know, that's one of those things they don't teach you in judges school about how to balance that. Look, I agree with Bob. It becomes very difficult for Judge Chutkan if this whole question of, well, is he immune? What's the scope of the immunity? Even if all that gets sorted out in, say, September, is she really going to schedule a trial in October?
Right.
Probably not. But again, there are no rules on this. It's just a judgment call by the judge. My best guess is I don't think she would hold a trial in October because I think it very well could span into November and December. So he literally could be on trial as he is potentially being elected president. My guess is she would push everything back, but we'll see what happens. I do think the Supreme Court is not going to fully resolve this, and there's going to be more work to be done in the lower courts.
Okay, so a lot of waiting. And of course, Jack Smith, as Bob, you have noted, is looking at all of this and waiting too.
He is.
All right, Bob and Tom, thank you very much for your time and reporting. We appreciate it. Campaigning and collecting cash. President Biden is heading out west for some major fundraisers. Next, we'll be joined by the Biden campaign spokesman, Kevin Munoz, for more on what the president has planned. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
With the 2024 election less than 6 months away, President Biden is traveling to the West Coast tonight to drum up some support. The president is scheduled to participate in 2 campaign receptions in the San Francisco Bay Area tomorrow, and afterwards he's expected to fly to Seattle to host more fundraising events there over the weekend. Let's bring in Kevin Munoz. He's the national spokesperson for the Biden campaign. Kevin, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So we were talking about the president's fundraisers out west, but I want to talk about where he went yesterday, which was Wisconsin, key battleground state, of course. And our CBS News polling shows that it is a pretty dead even race there. Biden just a point behind Trump, but that is mostly fueled by the economy and voters saying that they recall the economy being better being good, I should say, under President Trump. So that's their recollection of it. How concerning is that dynamic for the campaign? And can the campaign actually change the way that people feel?
Well, thanks for having me, Caitlin. I think, look, this campaign is going to come down to a simple question. Who is fighting for the American people? Who is fighting on the issues that when you come home from work and you're at that kitchen table and you're thinking about bills, you're thinking about lower costs, you're thinking about the future of this country, who is fighting on those issues and who is fighting to take us forward? And that's Joe Biden. We also know that campaigns are won by putting in the work, talking to voters, and that's what Joe Biden did yesterday. He went not just to Wisconsin, but to where Foxconn, where Donald Trump famously said was going to be the 8th wonder of the world, bringing so many jobs to Wisconsin. He failed. He lied. And Joe Biden brought in more than $3 billion of investment into this community. So we got to get out there. We got to talk to these voters, especially while Donald Trump refuses to do the work to earn these voters.
I do want to ask about Donald Trump because actually, obviously he's been back in court today. That's been taking up a lot of his time. But with this case going on, he's also, still dominating the airwaves every day. And he's able to come out and make statements, even though he's, tied to the courtroom, essentially. And I'm curious if the Biden campaign is concerned about that, the idea that Trump is kind of all over the airwaves, and whether that may serve to benefit the former president.
Well, look, I think when the average American person goes home at night and is looking at the news, they don't really care about what's happening with Joe Biden or with Donald Trump in the courtroom. They care about the simple questions of who is fighting for their rights, who is fighting for better jobs, and who is fighting to lower costs. We also know that the American people are busy. They are getting their news from so many different places, and we have to talk to them, not just on the news, but through TikTok, through Snapchat, through all of the ways that the American people are getting their news. And that's exactly what this campaign is doing, especially with new investments this month, $14 million into paid media, more efforts on the ground to use small businesses as centers of organizing, and really taking this message locally to the communities that decide this election.
So do you think that voters are not paying attention to the Trump trials?
Look, I think at the end of the day, it's really important that we continue to focus on the issues that matter to the American people when they go home, when they go to sleep at night. And here is the reality. We need to do more to lower healthcare costs. Donald Trump wants to increase healthcare costs. We need to create more jobs at home. Donald Trump wants to take those jobs and send them to China. We want to make sure women can make their own healthcare decisions. Donald Trump doesn't believe in that. He refuses to let women make their own healthcare decisions. So we have to stay focused on those issues.
And Kevin, I want to ask you about kind of coalition building. Earlier this week in Indiana, there was a primary. The primaries are still going on. Nikki Haley got a not insignificant amount of votes. I know President Biden has said that there is room in his campaign for her supporters, but what is he doing specifically to reach out to those voters? And are they gettable for Democrats?
Well, look, there's not just room for them in our campaign. We're actually doing the work to talk to them every single day. After she dropped out of the race, we started investing millions of dollars into targeting those voters in the battleground states to talk to them about the fact that they have a home in our campaign. We are fighting for democracy. We are fighting for our Constitution. We are fighting for common decency in this country. While Donald Trump doesn't just say they don't have a home, he's attacking them. He continues to attack Governor Haley. Look, we know these voters. We have to show up. We have to earn their vote. We have a different set of issues that might matter to them, but they absolutely, if they care about the future of this country, have a place, and we are talking to them.
All right, we will see where they migrate by Election Day. Kevin Munoz with the Biden campaign, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kayla.
And gone from the race, but not forgotten, as we were saying, some voters still aren't ready to leave the Haley campaign. Our political panel is standing by to take a closer look at why some are still casting their vote for the former presidential candidate. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away.
Welcome back to America Decides. Does Donald Trump have a Nikki Haley problem? Well, even though Haley has been out of the race for months, she captured nearly 22% of the vote in Tuesday's Indiana Republican primary. And that follows other primaries in which she has received a significant share of the vote. So let's bring in our political panel, Joel Payne and Olivia Perez-Cubas. Joel is CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist. And Olivia, timely, served as the spokesperson for Nikki Haley's presidential campaign. Great to see you both. Olivia, I'll start with you, just given those numbers that we've seen there. Does that surprise you that she's still getting this relatively big portion of the vote?
No, it does not surprise me, and this is timely. And look, I think we've seen this in state after state. Nikki continues to get 15, 17, 20, this week in Indiana, 22% of the vote. And I think it is because voters are showing again and again that they are dissatisfied with the choice that they have at the top of the ticket, that they were looking for an alternative. And I think more than anything, the lesson here is that this is a question of what are Biden and what are Trump going to do with this information, right? What do the voters, what do they care about? What are they talking about? And at the end of the day, as Nikki just said in the clip that you played, it is up to both candidates to earn the vote of those who support her. And I think whichever candidate works harder to do that will ultimately be the candidate that wins in November.
I mean, Joel, we were just talking to the Biden campaign about the outreach that they're making, but is that realistic that those voters could come over to Biden, or do they stay home?
I think it's realistic that a certain number of those voters are viable for President Biden. You know, as we were talking, just looking at some of the sound that you were teeing up, we were talking about just the importance of coalition building, right? I mean, that's the name of the game here. Really, who is going to be able to put their coalition back together better? Is Trump able to put a 2016-like coalition back together that was winning for him? Or can Biden do a 2020 coalition redux that was a winning coalition for him? And I think the math for Joe Biden suggests that he's going to need a couple of those voters to come over from a Nikki Haley column to at least be open to him. Also important, how many resources do you force the Trump campaign to defend those types of voters that really should be very easily fitting in his coalition? And I think that's another thing that the Biden and Trump campaigns have to consider.
So maybe not necessarily winning them, but at least putting some pressure on the other side in terms of financing.
Force the Trump campaign to spend some resources there.
Olivia, I mean, the big question is whether Nikki Haley is going to endorse in this race. I mean, she said when she bowed out, of course, that Trump would have to earn her vote. Has he done anything to earn her vote so far?
I want to just be clear. I no longer speak for her, and I no longer work for her. And I think the irony of all of this is that not much has changed since she made those comments. I get the intrigue with what's Nikki going to do next, who is she going to endorse, if, when, whatnot. Ultimately, that's a decision that Nikki and only Nikki can make. I think right now she's kind of just enjoying her life. Her husband was serving overseas. He's now back. So, you know, we shall see. I think the bigger question is going back to my first point, which is what are Trump and Biden going to do to earn her voters? Because if we know one thing to be true, you know, it's this race in November is going to be a toss-up. It's going to be a nail-biter. And whomever works to earn the Nikki voter will be the one who wins. So I think the question is more on what are they going to do, not what Nikki's going to do.
Yeah, nail-biter to be sure. I mean, our battleground state polling shows a tied race in pretty much, you know, these three big states. I do want to talk a little bit about some of Trump's latest comments. You know, he's been in the courtroom all week, of course, but he does have the opportunity to come out and speak. And he was offering criticisms of Biden and his decision on weapons to Israel. I want to play a little bit of sound from him and get your thoughts on the other side.
What Biden is doing with respect to Israel is disgraceful. If any Jewish person voted for Joe Biden, they should be ashamed of themselves. He's totally abandoned Israel, and nobody can.
So, Joel, I'll start with you. What do you make of those comments?
Hot political tip, Olivia. You and I should start our own consulting firm right now. Don't shame voters. You shouldn't be shaming voters. If you want to bring someone into your coalition, you're going to have to do more than say, what they should do based on your projection of what their worldview should be. And look, I think the president is offering, by the way, a version of the world that I'd imagine there are some Nikki Haley voters agree with, that they might disagree with what President Biden did over the last few days. I can tell you, on Biden's side, he did a lot of work to start to mend some fences within his progressive coalition. A lot of progressive groups who were really disappointed with how President Biden has, I think they feel like, been unbalanced in his administration of the situation in Gaza. I think they feel a lot better over the last 24, 36 hours than they did previously, based on the fact that the president is actually showing some ability to use some leverage to pressure Bibi Netanyahu.
So that's interesting, too, because as you both know, I mean, everywhere, there are protests everywhere. But also, you know, I was covering Harris last week when she was in Florida covering abortion, and there were protests outside the event. So as much as the Biden campaign wants to turn the page, they are faced with these protests over and over again. Olivia, I'm curious what you make of the former president's comments there. Do you agree with Joel?
I think this is a typical case of Trump getting in his own way and being his own worst enemy. I think that, you know, Biden's recent actions toward Israel, like criticism there, could be warranted. And I think a lot of voters, not just Republican, but moderate, middle-of-the-road voters, want to see America stand with our ally Israel. Obviously, I do not condone his comments there. I think, you know, broadly speaking, like, the temperature is way up in this country, and we've got to turn it down. This kind of divisive rhetoric is not helpful. And to your point, voters don't want to be told what to think, how to live, how to vote. And this is not helpful, ultimately.
Basic campaign advice from two pros. Thank you very much,
You're
Joel
welcome.
and Olivia, for being here. We appreciate it. And the Department of Homeland Security is announcing a new immigration regulation that impacts asylum seekers. Camilo Montoya Galvez is following the latest at the southern border.
The Biden administration is publishing a new regulation that would alter the asylum process here along the U.S.-Mexico border. It would empower U.S. immigration officials to more quickly reject migrants who cross the border illegally and who are deemed to be a public safety threat or a national security risk, including those who are suspected terrorists. We also note that this rule in many ways is narrow in scope and will not take effect immediately, but it is still something that reinforces this massive policy shift on immigration by the Biden administration, which has faced unprecedented levels of illegal immigration here along the U.S.-Mexico border. We also know that separately, President Biden is also considering invoking a sweeping presidential power to further restrict asylum here at the border, but he has not made a final decision. And the urgency for him to act has somewhat lessened because of a dramatic drop in illegal crossings. Since soaring to record levels in December, illegal crossings here have dropped by over 40%. Camilo Montoya Galvez, CBS News, El Paso, Texas.
All right, Camilo, thank you very much. The bribery trial of Senator Bob Menendez is expected to begin next week. Here's what the New Jersey Democrat had to say about it to our own Nicole Killian earlier today.
Will you be there every day?
Yes, I'll be there subject to the schedule. We'll see.
Do you intend to take the stand?
That's to be determined.
Do you think you're being treated differently than your House colleague, Congressman Cuellar?
Everybody's innocent until proven guilty. That's my view. And for Congressman Cuellar, it's the same. How people react to it is their position.
Prosecutors are accusing Menendez and his wife Nadine of taking bribes from 3 businessmen in exchange for political favors and of conspiring to have the senator act as a foreign agent for Egypt. They have both pleaded not guilty and will be tried separately. And Congressman Henry Cuellar and his wife have also been indicted on federal bribery charges. Prosecutors allege they took hundreds of thousands of dollars from a foreign oil company and bank. The Texas Democrat has also proclaimed his innocence. And from the 1960s to now, how protest movements impact our politics. Our polling expert Anthony Salvanto will take a closer look next. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. and reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
At the CBS Evening News, we focus on solutions, finding solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
Welcome back to America Decides. Today's pro-Palestinian protests have prompted some to compare them to campus protests in the 1960s. But when we look over time, is it really the same? CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. Anthony, good to see you. So let's try to make sense of all of this. Are these protests the same?
I think they're different. Let me show you this. We went back into the archives, and yes, there were CBS News polls in 1969.
How convenient.
We keep them securely tucked away in what I like to call the poll vault.
Okay.
And so let's take a look at this. At that time, 77% of Americans said they disapproved of the protests going on against U.S. involvement in Vietnam. But the context here is different. Number one, the U.S. was actively involved with its military in that war. The other thing you look at is, yes, you had 19% approval, and that was a little bit higher for younger people in their 20s. However, they were also getting drafted. There was a draft going on. So, again, different context. Yes, a lot taking place on college campuses. Yes, there was a war, but those are things that you have to remember. Oftentimes, if people agree with protests, it has more to do with their ideology or whether or not they agree with the expressed ideas of the protest. Let me rewind the time machine just a little bit to more recent times. In 2020, when we talked to people about how they felt about people protesting the treatment of African Americans by police, well, you had a slight majority there support. You had fairly similar levels of support among those under 30, But if people said that they agreed at the time with the ideas of the Black Lives Matter movement, then support for those protests went up dramatically. So again, that's one historical illustration of the example that it really matters what you think about the subject matter, Caitlin.
Yeah, that's super interesting, Anthony, especially, you know, how much of a stake you have personally in that issue. As you mentioned, in the late 1960s, the stakes were pretty high considering getting drafted. What about the demographics here? I mean, the groups that we're talking about, I mean, not everyone's in college, right?
Exactly. So let me show you two things real quick. The first, it echoes what I was saying earlier. When you just look at the policy, whether or not you think Joe Biden should be trying to get Israel to stop its military actions, the views of those under 30 are, again, very similar to all Americans. And to your point about not everyone being in college, yeah, it's a third. It's a third of folks who are at, you know, give it over 25. That's the time at which people might complete a degree if they are getting one. So it's a majority of folks that don't have a college degree. And that's important because not all young people are in college or getting a college degree. And so that may or may not be representative of that wider stretch of the demographic, Caitlin.
Yeah, that's an important nuance there. Anthony Salvanto, Director of Elections and Surveys, and also the gatekeeper of the poll vault. We appreciate it. Thank you.
RFK is polling very low. He's not a serious candidate. They say he hurts Biden. I don't know who he hurts. He might hurt me. I don't know.
Should Biden and Trump be worried about RFK Jr., the spoiler candidate, and his push to debate? You're streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why? You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis? You're not answering my question.
This really
is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
People say, who's first to get in the morning? That would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
RFK Jr.'s presidential campaign is responding to new reporting that he suffered memory loss due to a parasitic worm in his brain. You heard that right. His spokesman told CBS News, quote, "The issue was resolved more than 10 years ago, and he's in robust physical and mental health. Questioning Mr. Kennedy's health is a hilarious suggestion given his competition." Our Ali Novello has been covering RFK Jr.'s campaign from the very beginning and is with us here now. Ali, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So who says this is a boring campaign? I mean, with this kind of headline. Walk us through what exactly is going on here. Why are we hearing about this brain worm?
Yes, Caitlin. So yesterday, the Kennedy campaign confirmed New York Times reporting that Kennedy revealed he had parasitic worm brains back in 2012. And this allegedly came out during a deposition amid a divorce from his second wife. He said back in 2010, he started experiencing symptoms, some cognitive problems. And this included memory loss and brain fog. And that a friend encouraged him to go seek out medical care, initially thinking that this was a brain tumor. And doctors had taken some brain scans and found a dark spot on his brain. But it was later found by one doctor that it could be a brain worm. So very interesting news, of course. This has all been confirmed by the campaign. They said it's likely he contracted these worms somewhere in South America, Africa, or Asia during his time as an environmental advocate. So.
Interesting. So, I mean, this is all, you know, a big headline and, of course, very, you know, kind of juicy. But why does this matter for this campaign, for a candidate who is kind of running as the alternative to the other guys?
Yeah, well, for one, you don't often hear about brain worms for an independent candidate or a presidential candidate in general. But more importantly, Kennedy has been trying to position himself as the more sharp candidate. And we often hear voters talk about how they're unhappy that both candidates that are being presented right now are older, right? And while Kennedy is not exactly a young candidate, he often points to his physical health and mental acuity to sort of separate himself from the other two, President Biden and former President Trump. So it's definitely interesting to see that the campaign has decided to brush aside any suggestions that, you know, his health isn't perfect. They've said that he is in tip-top shape and he's fit to run. And as you said, they said it was hilarious that anyone would suggest that.
Interesting. Yeah, running as the alternative, but this looming over. And of course, he is also on the ballot in a few states and potentially more to come. Ali Novello, thank you so much for your reporting on that item. Thanks for being here. The Office of Arizona's Secretary of State hosted exercises on election security today. This event allowed members of the media to experience firsthand how officials in the state are preparing for the 2024 election. Journalists participated in drills that were designed to show how election workers respond to potential cyber, physical, and logistical threats. In 2020, the state's razor-thin presidential outcome made it the national epicenter for misinformation about voter fraud promoted by Donald Trump. Republican Kari Lake also made false claims of election fraud after losing Arizona's gubernatorial race in 2022. And now she is running for the Senate this cycle. CBS News producer Elizabeth Campbell is on hand in Phoenix. Good to see you there. I know you were part of this demonstration today showing how election workers would respond. Can you kind of walk us through what these exercises looked like?
Yeah, Caitlin, well, good to be with you. What was happening was we were given a budget of $30,000 and then a list of different measures that the election office could take, whether that's a comms team or that's double authentication for their social media. There was just a few different things they could take to put together this hypothetical preparedness for the real threats that election workers are likely going to face this fall. Now, this was really a chance for the Secretary of State's office to showcase all of the defenses they have ready ahead of the election this November.
And Elizabeth, what exactly are these threats that they are, trying to react to or respond to?
Yeah, the Secretary of State today said that they are, quote, facing threats that no one has even seen before. And what he was really referring to there was AI. The concern here is that AI can now imitate a human's words, their voice, their face, even their emotions. So they're trying to encourage everyone to just think critically about the information they're getting before they act on it, whether that's making sure it comes from a .gov or calling back the person that just called them to make sure it really was who they were speaking to, or even just thinking about a question you could ask someone. Obviously something Caitlin and I could ask you about your kids that an AI wouldn't know, but you and I know the answer to. So it really is just getting everyone to think critically and spreading that word without spreading disinformation.
Yeah, an ever-developing frontier, unfortunately. Elizabeth Campbell, thank you so much for covering this for us. That's super interesting. And that does it for us today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson.
Welcome to the Daily Report for April 9th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. The historic and shabby spectacle of America's first criminal trial of an ex-president bounced Thursday from the salacious to the mundane. The day started with adult film actress Stormy Daniels and ended with Trump staffers, including a junior bookkeeper, from the sheets to the spreadsheets. While the ex-president